So, I mean, excess deaths, I mean, I think most people are coming around to agreeing that excess deaths is probably the best benchmark for understanding the impacts of the pandemic on society, on different countries, because, well, for a number of reasons, partly, the uncertainties around what is regarded as a COVID death and what isn't. As you said, different levels of testing, which might be available to compare one country to another, and all of these factors, which make it quite difficult. But excess deaths is certainly a reliable metric in that sense, at least. So how do the two countries compare? How do they compare to the rest of Latin America?
Well, I've got a table here, which you'd be welcome to put up in the video if you're able to afterwards, because the World Health Organization produced its own calculation of excess deaths associated with COVID. And there were two other calculations, one that was done for Amnesty International by a US body called the Center for Economic and Social Rights. And The Economist has been running its own calculation. And if you look at Latin America, on all three calculations, Peru comes out worst. And countries like Mexico, Bolivia, and Ecuador are all high up the list, with levels of excess deaths per 100,000 population. Honduras is towards the top of the Amnesty International list. It's further down on the WHO and Economist lists, but on all three lists, it's well above Nicaragua, which is towards the bottom of all of the lists. So this kind of proves the ultimate success of the Nicaraguan model, that of course people did die, but they didn't die at the levels of adjoining countries. Even countries like Costa Rica and Panama. Costa Rica has a gross domestic product per head, which is 5 times that of Nicaragua, but excess deaths were higher in Costa Rica than in Nicaragua.
And I believe Panama certainly had one of the highest COVID mortalities in the region, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It was hit by COVID very early on, and it really struggled to cope with it. I'm not sure why exactly. Probably because it's got a very privatized health system. But it certainly was one.
But it had an extremely restrictive. I mean, I had a colleague living in Panama at the time, and he was telling me that it was extremely restrictive in Panama. You were only allowed out, I believe, for 1 hour a day to go shopping, and men and women were allowed out at different times of day at the height of the lockdown restrictions.
Yes,